Cities in Civilization 7 has changed from the games before, and they are focusing on a solution on how you can play tall or wide in Civ 7. And how they've done it is quite interesting, but we have to see what they've actually done to see if it really is an option or if it'll be like Civ 5, where you're just optimized around building tall and four cities, or like Civ 6, where it's just better to go wide. Civ 7 is trying to make both viable. So, cities and towns in Civ 7. How do they work? First of all, your starting settler founds your main city. Any future settlers will found a town. So, your first settler puts down a city, which is a fully functional city as you would expect. The rest are towns. Now, towns just collect resources and can eventually be specialized to focus on a resource or a function, but they don't have production menus. Towns are for support. Once they grow to a certain population size, they get a focus menu. Now, that means towns can focus on one of 8 things. There are farming towns or fishing towns, which count as the food town. That provides bonus food on farms, pastures, plantations, and fishing boats. Then you could focus it on being a mining town, which provides bonus to production on camps, woodcutters, clay pits, mines, and quarries. There's trade outposts. That provides bonus happiness on resource tiles and trade range. You can also make a town a fort town, bonus to healing units and health to walls in this town. You could also make a town a religious site, which provides bonus to happiness to all temples in your empire. You could make a hub town, which provides bonus influence for every connected settlement. Now, settlement means town or cities, so settlement is just the word they're using to refer to both cities and towns. You could also make a town an urban center, which provides bonus to science and culture on districts with 2 buildings in the town. You can also make a factory town. Bonus gold towards purchasing a factory in the town, and it adds an additional resource slot. So, towns can be upgraded into cities over time. Once they reach the requirements, you can make a town its own entire city with its own production menu. But until then, it's just a town or a focus town on a specific industry. So what this means is you can play with a single megacity surrounded by towns, which would be playing tall, or you could turn every town you put down into a city by itself, which would be playing wide. But it's a gradient now. If you want to claim land, you no longer have to worry about spreading yourself too thin. Pop a town down and you're claiming that area, but it's not becoming a whole other city to manage. You still have your original city to manage, and that's where the focus is. The town just supports and boosts your empire. So this way, you should be able to play absolutely tall, single city with many towns, so you can have this mega city that just gets powerful and taller and stronger over time. Or you could have a few cities or many cities, turning those towns into more and more cities. So it should be a flexible gradient to have as many or as few cities as you want. Then we can talk about districts and improvements. We've got our cities and we've got our towns. The districts themselves are sort of like how they are in Civ 6 with a number of changes, along with improvements. One big contentious point is there are no more workers. The worker unit is gone. And it was sort of going this way, from Civ 5 and before. Workers were workers, building constant improvements. Civ 6 were the 3 or 4 shot workers, and then the workers depleted after doing a certain number of things. The direction Civ has been going was to reduce the worker busy work. But of course, being old school Civ players like me, or maybe like you, we tend to love workers. Workers were like, yeah, maybe a bit of busy work, but they were sort of an essential part of the game. But to be honest, a lot of times I just set them on automated, which isn't always the best. They've sort of felt the most impactful in Civ 4, and they've been waning since then. And in Civ 7, there's no more workers. So how do you build anything? Tiles are improved and districts can be placed once a relevant resource is stockpiled. So the city is constantly gaining resources, food, production, whatever. And the food will stockpile. And once you get to a certain threshold of food, you can use that food to buy a new tile, a new district, or a specialist. So you are using the resources you accumulate to build. You don't actually have a builder unit. You instead use the resource directly to build the thing you want to build. And also on districts, there are no more dedicated districts. You build an urban tile, and the urban tile can fit buildings on that district. And the district is defined by which 2 buildings you place on it. So one example is, if you place an urban district and you place 2 of your unique civilization buildings in that district, put down an urban district and you put your civ unique structures in that district, and it becomes a unique district. The buildings define the district. And that also means that adjacency bonuses, like in Civ 6, there were adjacency bonuses where, if you place a science thing next to another thing, then they boost each other. So this time, the adjacency bonuses are tied to buildings, not the districts, because the districts are basically blank canvases. You are defining the districts by what buildings you place in them, and then that defines a district. So this is a lot more flexible than before, and maybe it's more interesting. Let's see how it works out. Now, on a note for specialists. So specialists are something else you can spend your city's resources to acquire, and specialists are placed in districts. They consume food and happiness, but they also have a base yield bonus that is added to your city, and they also boost the adjacency bonuses of the buildings on that tile. Buildings and specialists will be working in tandem to make your city as powerful as it can be, and it's all flexible on where these things are going. Where you place the urban district is up to you. What buildings you place on that urban district is up to you. Where you place the specialists is also up to you. There's a lot of room for optimization here. Now, of course, when we're talking about cities and sprawl and growing, we gotta talk about happiness. There is a settlement cap, a soft limit on how many cities and towns you can have before people start getting upset. There is local happiness for each settlement, and there is an overall global happiness. So the big question is always, is it local happiness or global happiness? This time it's both. There are ways to increase your settlement cap, and of course you can try to manage unhappiness with things that make your people happier. So local happiness supports specialists and buildings that are functioning at that local location. And global happiness would lead to celebrations, special events that provide powerful buffs and slots for traditions and social policies. Generally speaking, an unhappy population would penalize you with lower yields. So that's generally how happiness works. There's local and global happiness. Then a big question on cities is, how are all these cities and buildings gonna work with the age transitions? We've been over the age transitions in a previous video. So what happens to your cities and all your stuff when you go from the antiquity age to the exploration age? Both ages are supposed to be very different gameplay-wise. So what happens to all your antiquated stuff? One big question people always ask is, do cities get auto-renamed through the ages? And what we've seen is cities don't get auto-renamed because you're changing civilizations. People have been asking, does my city name change to match my new civilization? And that's not really how it works. That isn't really how it works in real life either. Cities' names change when people decide to change it, which is like manually changing your city's names in a game. But auto-renaming cities would probably just be very confusing in the game, right? It's like, where's my capital? I placed down my city and I can't find it anymore because it's named something. No, I don't think changing cities' names automatically would make any sense. When it comes to your stuff, some buildings change and some don't. There are ageless buildings, buildings that are relevant to all ages. These are things like warehouse buildings. Those would be granaries, saw pits, fishing quays, brickyards. These are warehouse buildings in the antiquity age, so they are different in the other ages, but these buildings, you place them down, and just because you go from the antiquity age to the exploration age or the modern age, it doesn't mean you don't need a granary anymore. Those buildings stay, and their improvements stay, along with other unique buildings or improvements, because they're part of your culture, they're part of your history. The unique stuff will stay as well when the age changes. And of course, wonders. Your pyramids aren't just gonna disappear when you enter the exploration age. The pyramids will stay. Also, a note on warehouse buildings, since we're talking about them, they have a city-wide effect. They're not adjacency based, so when you build a granary, it's good for all your foodstuffs. So warehouses are more of a ageless thing and more of a universal thing. But besides those outdated buildings, which are no longer relevant to the new age, those lose their main effects. They will provide the base yield, but they will lose their main effect and they can be then built upon. You don't need to destroy it. The whole idea here is overbuilding. You're building over the old outdated stuff. So outdated buildings, they lose their effect and they become an open slot or tile that can be built upon with something new in the new age. So any outdated building, you just build right on top. Place a new thing right on top and you got your new thing. And that's generally how cities and towns will be working in Civ 7. So some thoughts here. The idea of all of this seems to be entirely centered around solving the tall-wide problem. Civ 5 favored tall, quite clearly. Civ 6 favored wide, quite clearly. And people criticize both. Because the tall players will want to play tall, but they hate playing wide. The wide players will want to play wide, they hate playing tall. So there's been criticism of Civ 5 and Civ 6 because people like to do different things, quite reasonably. Ideally, it should be as perfectly balanced as possible. And that's gonna be almost impossible to make tall and wide equally powerful. These are two very different playstyles. Generally speaking, with every Civ game, it leans to one or the other. And it's going to be very, very difficult to balance it in Civ 7 as well, so that it's very unclear which one is best. Also, with the adjacency bonuses, they can be fun or annoying. This seems more flexible with building adjacencies rather than district adjacencies, but how it really feels depends on what you like as well. So the main problem with all of this is that if a gameplay system is too clean and too streamlined, the puzzle gets solved. You know, like how tic-tac-toe is a solved game. Like if you start as X, you either win or draw, like it's just solved. Whereas Civ 5 being optimized around 4 cities, for example. Being too clean or streamlined is generally not a solution. The other way to make something balanced is to make it as mirrored as possible, like chess. It's not 100% mirrored, but it's like as mirrored as you can get. And that doesn't work in a 4X game because people want variety and styles, so we can't have every Civ be exactly the same. That's not what the game is about. Another way to make something balanced is to make it so complex and context-specific that identifying the best next step is almost impossible. But then you risk having a convoluted and annoying game where you just don't even really know why things are happening. Civ 7 is continuing to attempt to simplify and streamline some things, like having no more builder units, while adding complexity to other things, like flexible districts. And it's not going to be perfect, but the goal is that it's at least fun. The idea should be that in a specific game, whether you go tall or wide should both be viable options, and you should be able to go both at all times, but you know, it's probably gonna lean more on one direction than the other. But the idea and the goal is to make tall and wide both viable, and the idea, like what they've communicated about how cities and towns work, seems to be a solution, seems to allow tall and wide as a playstyle. Besides that, it's gonna be about balance, making both viable and making both fun to play. Though of course, at the end of the day, it depends on what you prefer. Are you a tall or are you a wide player? And generally, what do you think of cities in Civ 7 and how they've turned out now that we know these details? Let me know. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. There's more Civ 7 videos on the channel, linked down below for the playlist. Do go check it out. And I hope you found this interesting and or useful. And I'll see you in the next video.